Hello, my friend. Could the solution to sustainable protein and even healthier wetlands come from one of nature's most famous builders? As wild game prices soar and chefs hunt new flavors, beaver meat is quietly making a comeback, fetching up to $15 a pound in niche markets. But what's the real story behind this aquatic mammal, and why is it suddenly prized by foodies, trappers, and conservationists alike? History and culture. From fur trade staple to modern revival. Few animals are as intertwined with North American history as the beaver, Castor canadensis. 1. For indigenous peoples, beavers provided food, pelts, and tools. 2. During the fur trade boom of the 1600s, 1800s, beaver pelts were soft gold, while the meat, tail, and even castor glands fed trappers from Montreal to the Rockies. 3. Beaver tail was considered a delicacy by French-Canadian voyageurs, prized for its rich, fatty flavor, especially during Catholic Lent, when it was classified as fish by church authorities. Modern perspective. After the fur trade crashed and beavers nearly vanished, both their numbers and culinary reputation rebounded. Now, with wild food and foraging movements surging, beaver is finding its way back to the table, often marketed as sustainable, ethical, and even gourmet. Ecology, the engineer that changes landscapes. Beavers are ecosystem engineers. 1. Their dams and lodges create wetlands that boost biodiversity, recharge aquifers, prevent erosion, and mitigate floods. 2. Wetlands created by beavers are nurseries for fish, birds, amphibians, and other wildlife. 3. Beaver activity is so powerful, some biologists call them keystone species. Remove beavers, and entire habitats change. Population and management. North American beaver numbers have rebounded to over 10 to 15 million after nearly going extinct in the 1800s. In some areas, overpopulation leads to flooding of roads, farmland, and timber. Regulated trapping balances ecosystem needs and landowner concerns. Harvesting, trapping, hunting, and regulation. How is beaver meat obtained? Almost exclusively from regulated wild trapping, usually as part of population and habitat management. Modern trappers use humane methods, and all harvests are reported and tracked by wildlife agencies. Seasons, quotas, and licensing ensure sustainability and protect beaver populations. Market value. Beaver pelts are still sold, but meat can now fetch $8–15 per pound at farmers markets or specialty butchers, especially in Canada and some US regions. Processing. Beaver is skinned, cleaned, and often soaked to mellow any wild flavor. The tail, rich in fat, is a delicacy used in soups and traditional dishes. Culinary profile. What does beaver taste like? Flavor and texture. Beaver meat is deep red, lean, and slightly sweet, often compared to grass-fed beef, with a touch of wild game earthiness. The tail is uniquely fatty, a bit like pork belly or duck confit. When properly cooked, beaver is tender, juicy, and remarkably versatile. Classic preparations: roasted, stewed, slow-cooked, or smoked. Beaver stew, tail soup, pulled beaver sandwiches. In Quebec and the American South, beaver tail cracklings are a rare treat. Modern chefs. Some fine dining restaurants are experimenting with beaver terrine, confit, tacos, and charcuterie, highlighting its sustainability and flavor. Nutritional highlights. Lean protein, 22 grams per 100 gallons, similar to venison or grass-fed beef. Low in saturated fat, except the tail, which is rich and fatty. Rich in B vitamins, iron, zinc, selenium, and omega-3s. Wild foraged diet means higher micronutrient diversity and no antibiotics or hormones. Tail fat. Once used as a wilderness butter, beaver tail fat is prized for energy and cooking. Allergy note. As with all wild game, beaver meat should be well cooked and handled properly. Economics and market trends. The new wild game frontier game. Meat boom. The wild game market is now valued at over $3.5 billion globally. Market Data Forecast, 2023. Beaver is a small but growing segment, fueled by ethical hunters, chefs, and eco-conscious consumers. Value-added products: smoked beaver, sausages, charcuterie, and even pet food. Profitability: beaver is often harvested for pelt management. Meat sales are a high-value, low-cost bonus for trappers and specialty suppliers. Ecological economics: where beavers are overabundant, controlled harvest helps prevent costly flooding and infrastructure damage, saving millions in repairs annually. Controversy, ethics, and food safety debate. Some animal advocates oppose trapping, while conservationists highlight the ecological necessity in managed areas. Others question if beaver meat is too wild for mainstream palates. Food safety: like all wild meats, beaver should be cooked thoroughly. Risk of parasites. Sale is regulated in many areas. Check local laws. Cultural barriers: in some regions, eating beaver is traditional. Elsewhere, it's a novelty or even taboo, part of the challenge and appeal for chefs and foodies. Sustainability: the case for eating beaver. Why beaver might be the future of ethical wild meat. No feed, no antibiotics, no industrial farming. Harvesting helps manage habitats and reduce human-wildlife conflict. Consuming more wild game diversifies our protein sources and supports rural economies. Environmental bonus: by creating wetlands, beavers fight drought, store carbon, and enhance landscape resilience. Community, culture, and the revival of wild foods. Beaver hunting and trapping are family traditions in many rural areas. Community beaver feeds and wild game dinners keep culinary traditions alive. The wild food revival, led by chefs, food writers, and ethical hunters, is bringing beaver back into the spotlight as a symbol of sustainability and connection to nature. Beaver meat, the wild protein with a purpose. Beaver meat's journey, from dam builder to dinner plate, represents a new way of thinking about food, one that values ecology, ethics, and flavor in equal measure. Final thought: as protein prices rise and food systems face new challenges, could beaver meat, once a fur trade staple, become tomorrow's ethical, sustainable superfood? The answer might be in the wetlands, waiting to be rediscovered. Would you try beaver meat? For its sustainability, nutrition, or flavor? Should wild game become a bigger part of our food system, or remain a niche tradition? Share your thoughts or wild food stories below. Subscribe to AGRI360X for more deep dives into food, wildlife, and the stories behind what we eat, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.